Hi, I'm Edgar.
And I'm Paul Allen.
And welcome back to the brush. In today's episode, we'll be looking at Orktober. We'll be looking at some contrast paints, and we have a message from the Ordo Redactus. But first, shall we get started with a model that we have painted recently?
Yeah.
And I will kick us off with...
When I was at your house the other week, you just started painting that one.
Yeah. So this is the Elf Rogue in the Strata Miniatures Dungeons and Diversity set. It is a series of Dungeons and Dragons style characters in wheelchairs, which I think is a really cool addition to the options that exist. I even did a video of painting this one. I had some issues. I have issues with my airbrush. I think it's just the airbrush I have is broken. I have another airbrush. I'm going to practice with that a bit, I think. But also, I'm not sure you can see that lump on the base.
Looks like blue tack.
Milliput.
Ah, okay.
Because I printed it at this angle, and I printed it a bit too close to the print bed, and that kind of got stuck into the raft. Yeah, so I had to and I mean, milliput and a bit of sanding, it took like 2 minutes to sort that out. It wasn't a big issue.
I have been trawling the old Facebook sales groups again. Picked up a few things to look at. So first off, there's this guy. Now, not finished yet. But I'm working on a gold. So the Forge World
4-barreled plasma cannon.
Yeah, it's for taking down knights. So on the Forge World, they did like a metal. It was like a gold and metal, like a. Do you know like when metal gets heated and it goes all rainbowy?
Oh yeah, heat discoloration. I can't remember the correct name for it.
So I'm working on that at the minute. So this bit that's a gold dry brush, and then I don't really know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a play, and the rest is just me normal base.
Depending on the metal, there is a sequence of colours, and you can just look it up what colours it goes as it gets to certain temperatures.
And then I also picked up. I'm just going to pop that on top of my Google Home, and that won't at all upset it. Picked up the more common one of the Vindicator. Oh look, it's got cat hair on it. What a nice change. So I picked this up. This was really cheap. It was £12. So this center thing here was missing, so that's a resin printed part, and none of the tracks were there. So Ed's already seen these, but my friend,
the replacing the tracks, the entire track set of a Rhino.
So my friend modelled these for me. As part of the test, I printed them all individually and then glued them together, which is why they look a bit hoggity-poggity.
A bit uneven. I mean, that's not bad.
Natural. It's natural. It's tank tracks. I mean, when you look at it the right way up, it looks just...
You can't sell it from that direction.
So this is another one of the models where I've picked up, and the person had built it with super glue. And when I put it in the Invitro strip, it's fell bits, which is always nice because it's easy to put them back together. And I also got a knight, but he needs some work. I've got the legs, obviously. But yeah, probably next month we'll be able to have a look at it.
Just casually throw that one up. Another one that I have painted is this little chap with his sword standing on a Highland rock. This is one of the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings model. I've looked up which model this is twice. It's still on their website. You can still buy it. But I can't remember his name, even though I've looked it up twice. Erebor, perhaps? I don't know. It is one of the humans. Interesting thing about this model, less so the model and more the base, and how I kind of made this base accidentally. So I've been silicon molding and then resin casting simple repeatable shapes like bases and stuff like that. Because you end up with a lot of models that you get from eBay sales or whatever, they're missing bases or whatever, and being able to just like use a 5-minute epoxy into a silicon mold and have, there you go, there's the base ready to go. But I'd actually run out of silicon, and I didn't have a mold for because I wanted to put this guy on a slightly larger base. Comes with a 25 and I wanted to put him on a 32. I didn't have a mold for a 32 base and didn't have a spare 32 base. So I actually took a 32 base that had already been painted, took it off of a model, and made a cast out of hot glue. Sorry, made a mold out of hot glue.
Oh, God.
Now, this would have worked perfectly fine if it had been a flat top base. So you know that the 25mm bases, they're flat top and they've just got this chamfer at the edge and that's it. The 32s aren't. They're rounded at the edge, that's fine, but then they have a recess on the inside. I get it, it's so that you can put basing material in there and put the model at the right height and balance things out how you want. But the hot glue wedged in there and I couldn't get it out. It might also be because it was painted. Hot glue doesn't necessarily stick to the plastic, but it does stick to the paint. And as I was pulling the base out, the mold, the hot glue mold, tore itself to bits. I went with it. I tried to cut it out, so I ended up with the other base is filled with this plug of hot glue. I managed to get the other model, like the other model, back on their base, and that's fine. But then I tried to cast into this base, and I wasn't sure it was going to work, so I used the 5-minute epoxy, put it in the base, and I didn't put enough in. Disaster after disaster, it's all going wrong. So I've only filled this base with the tiny amount of epoxy. So I mean, what do you do when you've got epoxy already half filled? You can just put more on top and just stir it in, right? Yeah, don't ever do that. That's a terrible idea. Always go back to your original mixing pot, mix it together there, and then pour it on top. But what I did, of course, is I squirted both parts of the epoxy into the half-cured epoxy and just stirred it in. It started to, like, the first lot of epoxy had started to cure.
Yeah. Like,
started to go hard, and it was tearing it up while I was mixing it. Anyway, so I put it aside and I left it for a bit. And then I tried to demold it too early. So again, this is disaster after disaster. Bad decision following from bad decision. And I pulled it out. And where I'd stirred, the new epoxy had fallen to the bottom. And the first lot of epoxy was around the edge. So when I started to pull away the mold, I was like, oh, the edge feels nice and like it's done. That's great. Good. So I started to pull it away. I edged it all, like broke it away from the edge, started to pull it out, and then I noticed all of the inside is just gloopy still.
Oh, I see. So it all flopped.
And I tried to put it back in the mold, and that wasn't happening. So I was like, oh well. I grabbed a carrier bag, dumped it out, put the kind of this half-cured mess on the plastic bag, and I left it. I walked away. Fine. I'll get a different base for this model. I'll get when my next batch of silicon arrives, I'll make a proper mold and whatever. But then it cured, and I had a close look at it. And you'll have to have a look at the photographs of the model to really appreciate how this turned out. But it looks like layered rocks. Like where it tore and where it pulled out of the mold badly, kind of parts of it cured and parts of it not, it's layered and it looks like rocks. So I just painted it grey, dry brushed it, and stuck a few flowers on it.
Happy accident.
And it looks really nice. It is. I've never been one for fancy bases. I'm usually the type, and we'll see that later when we look at Orktober. Most of my models are just paint the base a nice flat grey. Paint it 2 layers so that there's no brush marks, but that's it. Don't do anything fancy. But this actually looks really nice, and it kind of complements his pose, this kind of stoic waiting for battle.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about the flowers?
Yes, that is a good point. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 patches of flowers, but those come from a single flower tuft. Flower tufts and grass tufts are pretty popular in the hobby at the moment, but they don't look right. You have this base and you have mud or you have gravel or you have rocks or whatever it is that you're putting underneath, and then you have this one humongous clump of grass in one corner of the base, and it looks weird. It doesn't quite look right. Whereas what I've tried to do here is break it up so I can put a few flowers and then a few flowers, and then a few flowers, and a few flowers, and it looks. I mean, maybe it doesn't look accurately realistic, but it looks a little more believable than just a clump.
Those are the ones we got from Gamer Grass, were they?
Gamer's Grass, yes.
Yeah.
So this is the Gamer's Grass flower tufts, the yellow ones, obviously, and just broken up into smaller sections. Because I thought that would look a little... And like I said, this is probably the best base I've ever done, and that just shows you how few bases I've done.
Yeah, I mean, my bases are all inconsistent as well, which just I like. I've been doing some desert ones of recent, and then like, oh, we'll have some mud on this one, and then so my bases are all over the place. But for the sisters, I just do a gold ring, and then I know that's the Sisters of Battle model.
The gold rim actually looks pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm just looking. I think I've only got one partially painted in front of me, which is I put some little cactuses on a desert. Ooh, there, not finished yet, but okay. So as obviously me and Ed are returning back to the brush as such, contrast paints was never a thing really when we originally started doing these kind of things.
Strictly speaking, it was. It just wasn't called contrast paints at the time.
It's certainly not something I've ever used. And looking at the videos, I always think, oh, it feels a bit cheaty. And so I decided to pick a couple up to play with. So I've got 3 of the Sister Dar ones here. So the black one, which is a Black Templar. So I did this guy as a test. Now, I think Ed's already seen photos of this in person. I quite liked it on this model, except for where the rough from the priming, but yeah, no, very well there. That I think worked quite well on him, and we'll get some up close photos for you now.
On the webcam view, that actually looks like a very dark green. Is that how it appears in reality?
Yeah, there is a kind of green tinge to it.
Generally speaking, the advice I've seen from a lot of the like expert mini painters is that when you're painting black, don't paint black. Paint an extremely dark of some color. So paint a dark green or a dark blue or a dark red, and paint it so dark that it looks like black, but don't actually paint black. Like in the very recesses there, you can put the black.
So then the next one I bought was the Griff Charger Grey. So this is for stone effects. So away from this video series, me and Ed are doing a little bit of a paint off challenge, and as part of that I wanted to do a statue, so I picked that up to do that.
I think between the two of us, you're treating it as a painting challenge and I'm treating it as a modelling challenge.
Yes, yeah, I mean,
hopefully between the two of us, yours will be nicely painted and mine will be nicely modelled.
I must admit, we're probably going to put some clips of that in this series, but the main thing will be on our individual channels.
Yeah.
When
it's done,
my idea has gone off in random directions, and there's stuff
Good.
like it's gone. But my foam board, I tried spray painting it, and while the spray paint went on, the board sort of warped a bit, and that's it's a bit bananaized. Anyway, so I've got you can really tell there's like half a pot left. I'll hold it up to my light. So I thought to myself, well, let's try it on a bit of scenery and see what results we get. So I picked up some, I think, are these 3rd or 2nd edition? I can't remember.
If they're the buildings that I'm thinking of, yeah, those I'm pretty sure that these came in the 3rd edition starter box, and I'm pretty sure I have some of those in my bits box somewhere. I'll need to dig them out for you.
So I picked up, I've got about 5 or 6 of these. So I spray painted them white. I didn't do it with the official bone wraith that Games Workshop say to use, because I've got white primer and that's what I'm using.
Oh, you used unofficial paint.
I know, it's terrible. Yeah. So
Was it Halford's primer?
I don't know. It's Army Painter. Army Painter White.
Yeah, Army Painter sprays are relatively good.
But I have got the proper Bone Wraith stuff to spray paint some other bits, so I can do a test if but I don't think it's going to make much difference over white and Bone Wraith, which is slightly sandy. So, I mean, obviously we'll throw these up on the screen. So, I played it on, and it doesn't really work on what I would call a large area. What got me thinking?
Yeah, the heavy washes have never been particularly effective over big flat surfaces. They're usually used where there is like crevices and fine detail, because it's so the surface tension brings it into the recesses. So is there the contrast paint in between the bricks where the grouting would be?
Yes.
So it's coloured that,
so,
but not the surface.
Well, the whole thing is the contrast paint, except for the bullet holes where I've gone over with a black wash, and obviously a bit of blood for the blood god there just to add some colour. Now, what got me thinking about whether this would work for scenery is when I was over at Ed's house recently. We were watching, I think it was one of the Games Workshop's official painting tutorial videos, where someone was asking if you could use it on vehicles. But they only really did two bits, didn't they? Like I was expecting the video to be the full side, but they didn't. They just used it for certain areas.
So a heavy body wash is a very specific tool for certain jobs. It's not designed to do an entire model with. So if you were painting a vehicle and you want and there were certain parts of the vehicle that you wanted to have that effect on, then absolutely you can use a heavy wash contrast paint on those parts. But it's all about using the right tools for the right jobs. And as we mentioned, for the terrain, a big open flat surface isn't where you use a heavy wash.
No. So basically, that's what set me off on doing this. Since I've painted it, I have dry brushed some white on there just to try and fix it.
Give it some definition.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the webcam view goes, that looks really good.
And then I've dropped some black wash into crevices and stuff to try and fix it.
So basically, everywhere where there was contrast paint, you've gone over with something else.
So basically, I mean, if you look at the bottom,
it did so bad.
It's just a flat. It just doesn't work. The problem was where it pulled and stuff. I mean, ignoring the rust effect I put on there. In these sort of archways, you end up with a load of dark at the bottom. It didn't work. It was an interesting experiment. I've now got like 5 or 6 of these. But it's a no-goer on it's a no-go on scenery anyway.
And all it cost you was like the £17 for half a pot of Citadel paint.
I mean, there's half of it left. But to be fair, I did buy it for the statue for the other project.
Buying a pot of paint for one part of one build just to win a competition.
I'm going to win something that has no prize. So yeah.
Oh yeah, there's no prize in it.
Wanted to just show. So I've picked up this off eBay. This is my normal technique for Sector Mechanicus and such. I do it in a black spray paint and then dry brush like a copper. And I love doing my scenery this way. And then I just spent hours.
I did something similar a while back to one of my. Do you remember the post-apocalyptic set I've got that I've no idea where it came from?
No.
I got some 28mm models. They're post-apocalyptic, but I can't remember what company they're from. And they're slotter bases, but on the slot it doesn't like give any it doesn't give the company's name, or it doesn't tell me what the models actually are. But one of those, I painted the armor. I painted it black first, and then I dry brushed it over with like the rose gold paint that I've got. Really lightly over it, and that looks really nice. It's one of my favourite models actually at the moment. Yeah,
so I mean, I've really taken a fancy to that style of painting scenery. Although, when there's not very much detail, it really looks a bit bland. Like I've obviously gone in and painted the wires and stuff on this bit. But
yeah, I see the open areas there. It kind of looks like it's how dry brushing works. You end up with this bloom effect in the middle of the surface.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well when there's less detail.
I mean, that's still perfectly serviceable.
Oh yeah, I mean that's done.
Absolutely.
So, Orktober.
Shall we talk about Orktober?
Let's.
And shall we talk about how the other models that I painted this month? So I've shown the two individual ones that I spent specific effort on painting them individually, but I also have
many orcs.
There's 30 in here. There's actually another 2 that I've separated out because I want to do something different with those. But there's 30 orcs there, and they're all falling over because they're in an egg box lid. And I've painted all of these this last month, and they're definitely done. And don't look at the bases because the bases aren't done. They're not done. I haven't quite achieved victory with these models just yet. But quite a few of them here, I think actually more than half of them, are the 2nd edition box set mono pose orcs. And these, they're pretty much everywhere, these orcs, and everyone ends up with one. And even Ratman's ended up with one by mistake. But the ones that I got, they all had their axe cut away. So that it's actually a bolt pistol. It's not a slugger yet. It's only, or is it? Is it 3rd edition or 2nd edition? I might have to look that up. But it's either a slugger pistol if it's the new version, or it's a bolt pistol if it's previous version.
This one looks like a bolt pistol.
Yeah.
That I've got here.
In
fact,
so that arm, on almost all of them, that arm is fine. Some of them were damaged, but most of them were fine. But then the left arm, which holds the axe, all of them had just the axe at the top of the hand or the bottom hand cut away, and so they're basically just holding the handle, and there's nothing attached to it. So I've gone through my bits box. I've taken, let's find some examples. This one and this one. These two have axes and a chainsword. So these are from the 3rd edition orcs set, and I've cut those away from the hands. Some cases I've actually cut it at the wrist and replaced the whole hand, which is a little bit weird because they've now got these slightly spindly arms with huge hands at the end. It's close enough that it just about works. I've also got some of the again, 3rd edition orc box set came with extra knives. You're supposed to just stick these on the belt of the orcs. They're not actually supposed to be armed with them, but I've cut them in such a way that I can put them in the hands here, so I've done that. I've also got stuff like this. These are choppers from the Warhammer Fantasy Orcs set, because after 3rd edition 40k there was a reissue of the orcs for Warhammer Fantasy. I think it might have been the Savage Orcs, but the bodies and the arms, the joint at the shoulder was the same, the joint at the neck was the same, and the joint at the waist was the same. So all of the parts were interchangeable, and that's great, particularly for an orc player. It's like they're different bits. Grab some of them and mix all of the bits together. So loads of my 40k orcs have bits of Warhammer Fantasy, and it was before Age of Sigmar, so this is Warhammer Fantasy era. But I ended up with all the spares. So there's a spear that I've cut down to be a proddy metal stick, and there's
a proddy metal stick
bone chopper. But then also, just to add some variety, these double-headed axes, which in comparison to everything else look very thin, they're actually much smaller than the other axes. These are dwarven. Because I also have a Warhammer Fantasy dwarf. I can't remember what I think it's just the generic dwarf regiment, because it came with bolt throwers, crossbows. It came with two-handed axes. It came with single-handed axes. It came with shield. So I guess you could pick any of the dwarf unit types, or at least several of them, to arm them with. And so I made them up randomly just to have a variety of different dwarves, because I'm not a dwarf player. I don't need them. But if I play an RPG and someone wants to play a dwarf character, hey, root through all of these and find the closest one. Great. But I've ended up with loads of spares, and so I've got some dwarf axes on there, and now I've painted them up. The rest of the orcs that I painted to make up the other half of the 30, most of these are actually the 5th and 6th edition monopose or kind of quick build orcs. So the orcs I'm used to have the legs as one piece, the torso as one piece, and then you have legs, torso, left arm, right arm, head. So it's 5 pieces. Whereas these ones are the body and one arm is one piece. Usually the other arm is another piece, and then the head. So it's only 3 pieces.
You can do that kind of articulation and which way the head's facing.
Yeah, so, some of them are kind of a bit lame. I'm pretty sure this arm is one of them, and that's actually a nice pose.
Yes,
it's not a bad pose, but then the slugger arm, depending on which one you choose to put on, you can put it on at different angles. So I'm not massively against them. I prefer having more parts, because then you can cut at the shoulder. This is an old trick we used to do. If you cut like a triangle out of the shoulder, glue that piece underneath, you then raise the angle of the shoulder, and it still looks natural. They're actually, Games Workshop have actually done that deliberately with this model. Kind of, if you see the muscle group going down into the shirt there, underneath the shoulder. Like, that's what we used to do all the time, but they've actually made a specific model of that. But now you can't, now you have to have it in that position. It's much harder to convert that to something else.
Are the orc models that they sell nowadays, are they fixed pose?
I actually don't know.
Yeah. I was going to say, because like with the Primaris, because I've got a few of the Primaris, like new Space Marines, some of them come as monopose, quick build, and you have to start cutting at things with a knife. Some of them come and they are poseable.
I suspect, although I don't know this for certain, that the Orc box set, if you buy the Orc box set, it's 5-piece or 6-piece. But if you buy the quick build orcs, or the easy build orcs, whatever they're called, push fit.
Yeah, I don't know what the proper word is either. It's push fit, basically. You don't have to glue them, but
if you buy those orcs, then it's the 3 parts, the simple ones. The thing is, the sculpt for those orcs is the same sculpt as the 3rd edition. So when they released these orcs for 3rd edition, and like I say, it's hard to tell which ones are which because it's the same sculpts. They've modified some of them, like they've like made the shoulders a bit more dynamic in some cases, but in other cases it's just one of the arms from the set glued to the shoulder of, or like fixed into one piece and molded as one piece with a torso from that set, and then the legs are that same component. So the original sculpt in a lot of cases is the same from 3rd edition to now.
Yeah,
there have been some changes, there have been some updates, but generally speaking it's the same.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading on the community website that there's rumours there's going to be an orc warboss on a bike model coming out, a new one.
Nazdrake?
I didn't read masses of this. I was just looking at the new release stuff earlier today.
Excuse me while I just go epic nerd mode.
And I see you've got your modern up-to-date codex out. Look how thin it is. It's so thin.
This is the 3rd edition Orc Codex. I have the 8th edition, which is down there somewhere, which went out of date about 3 days after I got it because they announced 9th.
It's not out of date yet.
Nazdrake. Nope, it's not Nazdrake. It's one of the other ones. So Nazdrake is just in Mega Armor. He's just a little version of Gazkul, it looks like. I mean, he costs 3/4 of the points. Oh no, Nazdrake is a big mech. Oh, here we go. Wazdaka Guts mech is the one I'm thinking of. So Guts mech is, again, he's a mech, not a war boss, but he is on a war bike. Twin linked autocannon. Nice.
So
much more powerful than the big shooters they would usually have.
So earlier in the week, I picked up our Facebook sales a box of Warhammer figures, £10. The photos were rubbish.
Gotta love that. It's just this blurry picture. You can't tell what's going on, and it's like, £10 for some bits, and it's all and like there's a 50% chance that it's just the leftover bits from the set. So you're going to get 15 heads, 12 arms, no bodies, and like maybe one leg.
So yeah, well, I mean, I could see enough to see there were some orcs. I could see there was Space Marines.
Okay, so long as there's enough there that you're like, okay.
Yeah. Well, in the box when they gave it me, it's mostly Dark Eldar, but there's a metal Dark Eldar Raider ship. Snipe and Webb's video for 3rd edition Dark Eldar.
Back to 3rd edition again.
Well, they're 3rd edition models. They were raiders, so they were like coming in, and I think it was stealing people away, like abducting them. So it's like a floating. I can't really show you because it's sitting in paint stripper at the moment.
I apologise. I've just worked out where my mistake was. I thought you said Dark Angels, which is a chapter of Space Marines.
No, Dark Eldar. Sorry.
Dark Eldar. Yeah. So the 3rd edition Dark Eldar. Strangely enough, I also had some of the Dark Eldar warriors, the infantry, because they came in the 3rd edition starter box, which I got.
Yes, yeah. So I've got the Raider. I've got a metal unit, a bigger one, and then about 10 normal units. One guy without a head and just a pair of legs. And then I got about 20. Are these called squats? The little orky things.
Grots.
Grots. So basically for
monopose Gretchen.
So for today, last night I painted me one orc guy, which happens to be the same model as what Ed was showing earlier, which is cool.
It's the same 2nd edition orc from the starter box set.
So there was just one of these in there, so I've painted him up. Put a bit of blood for the blood god on his axe. I
Nice.
even did the base in like a light green colour to kind of match my memory.
Is it Goblin Green?
It's Death Guard green, yeah.
Ah, such a shame. I actually still have my Goblin Green paint from who knows how long ago. I've just kept adding water to it every couple of years because it needs it.
Drying out. I think when I started playing, the first box it was Fantasy Orcs I bought, and it was Snot Green. I distinctly remember the name because it's just funny. So I've got this little geezer as well. So I've never really painted orcs before. So I did both these last night, and I literally just went off what I felt like. It's amusing because I used the blue because I just needed to. I've got this bottle of McCrag blue that came with my starter paint set. I've never used it because I don't paint any of my Marines in blue, so I just coincidentally painted the trousers and the little thingy in blue on mine and Ed's match, but it wasn't deliberate, I promise. Because on this guy, his little wristband, I deliberately made it purple, so he's got an invisible wrist.
Yeah, obviously you never see purple orcs, and therefore purple is obviously the colour of stealth. So commandos should always be purple because then they just disappear because you never see purple orcs.
So there's a few interesting things I've noticed after looking at Ed's today. So for example, I painted all 3 of these horns to be bone, whereas on Ed's, the centre one, he's done it as metal, and these.
Given the shape of it, the centre one all looks like it's a metal piece, but the side horns look like they're separate pieces. So you could, I would genuinely paint the centre one as metal, and the side ones can be anything at all.
Interestingly,
the
centre one
this
of mine
has
bent,
red horns.
like it's. Oh, cool.
Yeah, I have a couple that I have painted white, and I will eventually paint bone. I'll do some wet blending between brown and white.
Yeah, I mean, I was using Recklin Fresh, just because it's like a tan colour, and then doing a brown wash over the top. And then this guy, again, I did the horn the same just to make him match, because this is the extent of the orcs I own, so I just wanted them to match as a set. I have incidentally got about 20 of these, but I'm not going to paint any more of them.
Everyone's got 20 of those, Gretchen. There was recently a challenge on Paint Bravely, the podcast. So on Paint Bravely, they had the challenge, and really it was eBay Miniature Rescues just deriding Goober Town about it, and it wasn't like a proper challenge or anything. But the idea that eBay Miniature Rescues, I can't remember their actual names, but he said that Goober Town Hobbies should just get as many of the Battle for Skull Pass goblins. So these are spear and what they're originally Warhammer Fantasy. Now they'd be Age of Sigmar. With there's some with shield and spear, and there are some with that are archers. And just get as many of them. If you can get 1,000 of them, and just do the 24-hour painting challenge, and just see how many you can paint.
Wow!
And then do it again and again and again. And for every and he said for every 400 that Goober Town has, he'd paint 100, which is awfully generous. And then they considered if they got enough of them, they could just hand them out to other YouTubers and just get everyone to paint these goblins, and eventually bring them all together and have like a 10,000
that would be
army.
amusing.
That would be funny.
It'd be something you could do for charity as well. That would be. Imagine getting together somewhere big enough to house that many people, and just rows of people painting all the same model. That would be entertaining.
I want to see the battle report. I want to see like full armies going up against an infinite number of goblins.
I mean, my problem with this is it's just there's no way to vary these because they're all the same stance. I could cut him off that and put him on a different style base, but it's just so difficult to do anything with. Short of perhaps doing different coloured clothing, and then I could make some kind of regiment or something in my head. You know, head cannon.
In my bits box, I have several of that mold, that sculpt, that mold of goblin that have been modified, and it generally, this is back in the days before I had a proper like tools and the understanding of how to actually modify stuff properly. So I'd go at it with just a knife and cut my fingers off, but I would cut away the gun, and I've got one that's just holding a spanner. So he's just holding a spanner like this, in this kind of pose that you'd never hold a spanner in. And there's one holding a mallet. The mallet looks all right. I actually did a parody video of Goober Town Hobbies a while back, quite a few months ago, where I took one of those second edition 40k grots, cut away the gun, gave him one of the swords from the Orc fantasy Orc set that I was talking about earlier. Yes. I think I have. So I gave the goblin this knife. So, and can you see that gap just between the bone and the blade?
Yeah.
Yes. So can you see the gap between the bone and the blade?
Yes.
That's where his other arm is holding it. So he's holding it like this, as if it's a spear. Because for a little
him,
goblin,
it would be, yeah.
It's absolutely huge. It's like a two-handed, like a greatsword, massive, great big, humongous two-handed weapon, because he's just a little Gretchen.
Just amusing myself with the fact that if you put him in this bit of terrain, look, his gun just clears the top of the window.
Yeah, but he's not looking in the right direction. So because Paul last episode took the opportunity to show off every single vehicle in his collection of Sisters of Battle.
I wish. I've got a lot more than that.
He actually has more. And because this is Orktober, I'm going to take the opportunity to do the same in reverse.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm going to show off some of my orcs, and these are much older models. Many of them are still the same models that are available today, so they're not like super rare. Some of them are quite interesting, but most of them are not that rare. However, I'm going to start off with Edgar. So this is a model that I made. This is one of the old metal war bosses. I'm pretty sure that this sculpt is now available in plastic, and I have modified this one quite heavily. So I used to have my war boss, when I had a standard war boss, I'd use him the same way every time. He'd have a big shooter, he'd have a standard chopper, not a power claw. Everyone had a power claw. I'm not having a power claw. because I also had the bionic arm, which counts as a close combat weapon. So a standard close combat weapon and the bionic arm gave you an extra attack. Great. But then it also gave you an additional extra attack at a set strength, because it like has an extra saw blade, or I think the description said an attack, a little squig in a cage, which is just adorable. But also cyborg body, or cybernetic body, which gives them a 5+ invulnerable save. And that was my standard war boss, and all of my war bosses that I ever ran were the same. For Edskar, however, because he's a special character, and like he's a named character, I was going to twist the rules slightly to give him some extra kit. So instead of having one big shooter, he has 2. And depending on how the rules the rules changed over my time in the hobby. So when I first got it, if you bought the second big shooter at the same price, normally you couldn't ever have, because it's a 2-handed weapon, you could only have one of them. But again, twisting the rules for a special character. So I allowed him to have the 2 big shooters. At first, you'd pay the same price twice, and you'd get twice the number of shots. So it's 3 shots each, you get 12 shots. Later on, some other rules came in that actually it counts as one weapon with a reroll to hit. It still costs twice as much, so you still have to pay double the points.
Yeah, that's not as good,
but you actually get a reroll instead of getting double the number of shots. On average, you're hitting slightly less. I don't really care, because again, it's a thematic model. It's not really built for winning tournaments or anything. Now the the bionic arm isn't fitted on this model anymore, because it's broken. It's long gone. But instead of having a single bionic arm, so kind of imagine a Tech Marines servo arm sort of thing, a third arm. So that's how most of my orc war bosses were. So they got their 2 actual arms and then this mechanical arm over the top. Edskar was always supposed to have 2 mechanical arms over the top, and these would have like little saw blades and attack and little squigs in cages and all of that kind of stuff. And because of that, he doesn't have a chopper or a big chopper or anything like that. Doesn't have a power claw, but he has 2 of these arms that both count as a close combat weapon each, which means he still gets the +1 for having 2 weapons in close combat.
So I like the idea of like let me just get this model. Like like something like that coming off his back, I think would be really cool.
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't have my other warboss handy, but my other warboss does have that kind of thing. It's not a massive claw. It is just it's a fairly understated thing. I could go over the top, but it would just look weird if it was bigger than the orc that it's on.
Yes.
Anyway, so that model is Edskar. And I would like to point out that his shirt
left a bit. His red shirt
is purple.
Oh, is it purple?
Yeah,
he's invisible.
I mean, there's some red paint bleeding on from old wounds, but his shirt is actually purple. So even back then, I knew that purple was the best colour for orcs. So some of the vehicles are closest, so I'm going to grab those. So Warhammer 40k 8th and 9th edition, orcs have some really nice vehicles to choose from, particularly in the way of models. But back in 3rd edition, all of our vehicles were the Gorkamorka vehicles that were just reused. So that's a war track. It's the front end of a bike. The back end is just a track section, and then there's a dude with a pair of big shooters on the top.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that one in person.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Back in 3rd edition, that's 50 points. I mean, that's so cheap. It's not particularly effective, but it's cheap enough that you can just throw it on the field and use it.
Yeah.
And remember that you didn't have to be an infantry model to take an objective back then. So you could skittle this thing around behind some cover somewhere, go off and take an objective. It's not a very orky thing to do, but maybe it's the morky thing to do. I'm going to take it off of its base because otherwise I'll drop it. Another one of the Gorkamorka models. This is... I believe this is actually a named character in Gorkamorka. But this is a Deathcopter or Gyrocopter. It's been heavily modified because the back of it is a plastic oil barrel, whereas the rest of the model is metal. And one of his arms is a plastic orc arm from the 3rd edition orcs. So again, it's that whole...
I mean, to me, it sort of embodies the orc player mentality that you can just mess around with stuff. There's a lot more flexibility in their models, and the fact that you can just chuck bits of anything on there. It looks great.
Yeah, that is the point. Like, you're supposed to grab, like, if you want a squad of 3 Deathcopters, you buy 1 Deathcopter official model, and then you get a whole bunch of other things and kit bash the 3 together to make 3 completely different but all Deathcopters. Speaking of kit bashing, here's one of my old killer cans.
Yeah, it's not made of cardboard. What's going on? It's got 3 dimensions.
Yes, it's actually a fully 3-dimensional killer can. Strangely enough, the body, this front plate, is the front plate of a killer can. The legs, if you recognise those legs.
No, I do not.
Think Star Wars.
Oh, what's that? The little walkie at thing.
The chicken walker.
Yeah.
But instead of having the body above, it's kind of hunched
Below,
over and has the body below. And then it's got the wrecking ball, I think, is actually supposed to be the upgrade for a truck. But it just looks so cool, I had to put it on this.
Yeah, it definitely looks the place.
Yeah, and so that's one of my killer cans. Now, this is back when killer cans had an orc on the inside and had a ballistic skill of 2. Whereas now, apparently, killer cans have grots in them for some reason. Which
multiple grots or a single?
No, it's just a single grot. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me, because as soon as the orcs find out that there's a grot inside there, they're going to beat him up and take it from him. So some of my favourite models, and these are some of the rarest models I have, not necessarily the rarest, but some of the rarest. These are the 40k Orc Boar Boys. So the boars are from the Warhammer Fantasy Boar Boys set, but then you could buy the bodies separately. Now, these were long out of print when I was playing, and it's only fairly recently, a couple of years ago, that I was talking to another orc player, and they said that they had them, they didn't want them, and so I traded for them. And I traded a bunch of my Terminator armor, like orcs in mega armor that were made from Terminator armor, and I swapped them for this. And he thought that was like the best trade ever, and like, why was I giving away such cool models? And I'm like, dude, have more. Like, these are
cool.
really cool models, and they are models that I've always wanted. So I have I have 5 of them. One of them's a knob, and they all have Slugger and Chopper. So yeah,
it's cool.
Those are really cool, and I really like those.
While we're waiting, let's do a Goober 10 minutes shot. Look, sleeping cat. Yeah.
So even though I'm a 40k orc player, that doesn't mean I can't have some fantasy orcs as well. And so these are actually recent conversions. So all of the orc models I have, even the Warhammer Fantasy ones, were converted to 40k orcs. All of the parts were mixed up, and they all had guns, either a slugger or a shooter, whatever. Some of them I've more recently picked out a few of them and I've converted them back. I think I have 12. I'm not actually sure, but I've got a warband of orcs that I can play in. Maybe Mordheim if they have rules for orcs. I don't actually know, but something like Frostgrave or some of these other skirmish games rather than a battle game, I could use these orcs. So I've converted some of them to have bows, and this is the 2nd edition one we mentioned earlier with his shield. But specifically, I'd like to mention this one, because this, I think, is the rarest orc model I have. This is the Black Orc Banner Bearer that I've converted to, instead of having, he would usually be holding the banner in 2 arms at an angle.
Okay.
But I've cut this wrist and rotated it so that he's holding an axe at an appropriate angle, and then instead of holding the other end of the banner at the bottom, he's like punching with a shield. and it is. I think that's a really cool model. I've painted this. I first painted this many years ago, but I repainted it. I just painted over the top and just like covered over where I'd missed bits and cleaned it up. And then very recently I've gone over it again the same way. Sort of how like eBay Miniature Rescues used to do it, with like, rather than stripping the model and starting from scratch, but actually just painting on top and like fixing it. That's kind of what I've done to this, and I just keep going. And eventually I'll be done, but that's a lie, I'll never be done.
An extra, like, 5mm thick all the way around.
One of the other units that I still have that can be interesting to speak about are my burner boys. Now, back in 3rd edition, a burner boy mob was 5 to 10 models, and up to 3 of them could have burners. So I converted some of them to have burners. But the others still had slugger and chopper. But because they're a burning unit, I wanted to kind of tie them in thematically. Now, the full-size burner can be used as either a flame template weapon or as a close combat weapon. Turning a dial and it becomes a blowtorch sort of thing.
Okay, cool.
So I said, well, if I make some hand flamers, so these are the Imperial Guard flamethrowers that I cut down. And I knew an Imperial Guard player, and I used to be a Space Marine player. We end up with loads of these flamers left over because no one likes flamers, and so I had plenty to the one person using flamers in everything.
Everything.
Get the flamer, sister. Get the flamer, the heavy flamer. And so all of the other orcs in the squad that don't have the burners have hand flamers, because in shooting, because they're not effective enough to be a shooting weapon, so they've still got the slugger on the other hand, but in close combat they're just like these little blowtorches, and that sort of acts like a chopper because they cut through armor a little bit. And so I thought thematically that made sense. However, now the new orc burner boys, all of them have burners. Just all of them.
5 of them, is there?
It's a squad of 5, and you can choose to have it as a squad of 10 instead.
Yes. I'm just thinking now, because you were talking about the little blowtorches. If I just grab this, so look, the little fire extinguisher model, you could make that into a little blowtorch so easily. On one of my Mad Max vehicles, I did actually have some two pipes that I turned into bottles. I just rounded them off at the end and painted one blue and one red, and it's an oxyacetylene torch now. Cool. Back in 3rd edition, Orc Infantry was very effective, and it isn't as much anymore. But this is some of my Shooter Boys mob. There are 30 of them in total, so this is only a small selection. But these are the Drummer Boys, and every single one of them has a shooter with a drum magazine. Yeah. So on the sprue, you got 4 bodies, 4 legs, and you got 8 sets of arms. You got 4 slugger and chopper and 4 shooter arms. And one of those 4 shooters was had the drum magazine. And so by the time I'd got the amount of orcs that I have plenty of the drum magazine shooter left over. And so this whole mob of 30 got drum magazine shooters. And they're the Drummer Boys. Now, I didn't actually have enough to outfit them all with them, and so some of them have conversions. So this is one of the other shooters with just a disc attached in the right place to make it look like a drum magazine. This is one of the big Shooter Boys. This is actually one of the metal ones, and it has some of the shields from the skeleton sprue cut and attached in the right place to make it look like a drum magazine. And this guy has his cute little pet squig with his horrible gnashy teeth. So I think I'll end with these last 3, because these last 3 show my progression of painting. And the first one is one of the Drummer Boys, which I painted many years ago. And the paints are blotchy, thick in some areas, thin in others, and the way that I painted the skin was to paint it Dark Angel's green and then to dry brush Goblin green over the top. Okay.
And it looks awful because I'm bad at dry brushing. I always have been, and I still am bad at dry brushing. The orc in the middle here, this is one of the Gorkamorka youths. This is my favourite orc model of all. He's smiling. He's having such a great time. Look at that little face. He's so happy. I've always wanted that one, and I'm glad I finally picked him up. So the paint is applied much more thinly, much more smoothly. There's no highlighting or layering or anything like that. It's just base coated. But again, I dry brush the skin, so it's a dark. I think this is again Dark Angel's green with Goblin green highlights over the top. I painted this many years later, probably like 10 years later on those when I painted this one. But again, the dry brushing is awful and the skin looks bad. This third one is one that I've painted very recently in the last 6 months or so. Now this one has many techniques that I didn't even know, like when I painted this one. There are layered highlights. There's edge highlighting I knew about, but there's some decent edge highlighting going on here. And when it came to the skin, I have painted it in a layered highlight wet blending style, so that each of the muscles on his arms are actually painted separately rather than dry brushing over the top.
Yeah.
And it looks so much better. Like, the comparison between them is just, I mean, it's still not winning any painting competitions, but it is just a much better painted piece.
I mean, like, so these orcs that I did last night, they are Caliban green, which was just the green that my Imperial Knight was painted in, and then a green wash over the top, Beal tan green. So Manchester Nerfer gave me that. The green on these, I would say, is probably too dark, but I didn't have a lot of options in the green, and I wanted to get them done last night so that it was ready for today, so I wasn't going to sit and mix.
Which actually brings me to one of the notes in my show notes. The question, what is your favourite technique? And I'll kind of just say that I've just mentioned my favourite technique, which is wet blending. I very much like putting two different tones, a light and dark of the same colour, on my wet palette, and just painting them both onto the model at the same time and just pushing them back and forth.
Yeah,
it works really well for me, and I enjoy doing it.
I haven't tried it.
It's strange how dry brushing is considered a basic technique, and I can't do it very well, and wet blending is considered an expert technique, and I find it easy. Like it's so easy and so enjoyable. What is your favourite technique? Not necessarily what gives you the best results, but just what's your favourite to use?
Dry brushing. So again, if I go back to this piece of scenery, I really love that effect.
That does look amazing, and if I tried to dry brush that, even if I used the same paints and the same brush, I wouldn't be able to achieve that kind of result.
I'm disappointed by this bottom. They could have done something with that. But yeah, it just
no one looks at the bottom.
Well, it's just
no one looks at the bottom.
Well, it when it's on the table, it's kind of tall enough that you would see it. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, that to me, that I love that technique. I've done
that does look really good.
Like, so this is the top part of the Knight, Imperial Knight doodad. So that's the same. I got like the little. Yeah. Each army type now has a unique building that affects the playstyle somehow.
Yeah, I have noticed that the orcs have
the orc
the
one's
workshop.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I like the orc one. But this didn't originally have this centerpiece in it. It was these two crushed together. None of the Imperial Knights, not even the small one, will fit into that. So I've modified it by adding that extra piece in and then spacing things out. Because just like, let me pick him up.
So what is it? A refueling station?
Yeah. So he's supposed to sit in. I can't in that gap, and then that little welder arm thing there is obviously supposed to be doing repairs or reloading and stuff. But the original model, it wouldn't fit. But yeah, I've done a lot of scenery in that style now. I really like it.
Yeah, well, it works really well.
I don't know what I'm going to do with them. So I picked up these earlier in the week off of eBay. Me and Ed have a bit of a tradition where when we're playing, there always has to be a forklift. So
Yeah, so I have the. This is available on Thingiverse. It's Necromunda Forklift. I don't think it's a copy of any official model. It's just someone made some alternate version scenery, and it's a forklift truck with tracks, like caterpillar tracks. It looks really cool. It doesn't make much sense because if you were transporting stuff with a forklift truck, like forklift trucks are designed for indoor use, like over flat ground, or like if it's outdoors, it's like in a working area where it's flat. You wouldn't run that over bumpy ground, which is when you need tracks. So it doesn't make much sense, but it's a cool model, and I painted it, and I really liked it. And we've used it as terrain in every single one of our games. And when we got playing on Tabletop Simulator, we found a forklift truck. This is just a normal forklift truck model, but we use it in every single game. It has to be there somewhere.
It doesn't hold anything though. But the clip-in's not right. It's always very disappointing.
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, if someone wants to model us, I don't know how to model stuff for that game. I wonder if anything I make in Fusion can be sent over. Possible.
I bet you can, but it's having the time.
I just don't know how.
Yeah, sit and learn, isn't it? So. Interesting thing I printed. It's a dead beaky boy. So
Dead Space Marines.
I got.
Yes.
There's about 5 different models on Thingiverse.
It's one of those things where,
like there's details removed to sort of avoid copyright and such, but I like the idea of using those for scatter terrain.
Throw a couple of Dead Space Marines around.
Yeah.
You need to paint one of them white.
The medic. To explain why explain why the others are there.
He's the one that goes out to collect the gene seed from the Dead Space Marines, but then he got dead himself because he wasn't paying attention.
Oops. Bye. No, he's gone now. Top of my computer. A great deal of time painting, other than the mausoleum.
The mausoleums are coming along. We've recorded the intro to that, but as I said in episode 1, it's going to be a while. I've cleared out a lot of what I'm working on at the moment to make room for it, although I'm doing a collab with the Miniature Hobbyist at the moment, so that's my kind of focus right now, is to get that done, because I need to get that out. I'm not sure if that video has to be up before this video, so check my channel if you want to see that. I'm not sure when it's coming out. It's the end of October. I'm pretty sure it's the end of October. We have to get that done by.
In other news, I'm going to be doing a collab video with Manchester Nerfer. He is trying to collect all of these. Let me get some of these Space Marine Heroes 2nd edition. They're like blind bags, and I think there's 8 of them. So he's been slowly buying up boxes, like the retail boxes of these, to try and get a full set, and he's one off a full set now. So he's given me 2 of the models. They're all, I think they're Dark Angels or Blood Angels. They're all Blood Angels, but there's nothing.
They're all the same chapter.
Yeah, but there's nothing.
Oh, I thought they were all different chapters.
No, they're all. Okay. But there's nothing specific on them, so obviously you can paint them up whatever chapter you want. So obviously mine are going to be Hawk Lords because.
Fair enough, yeah.
That's how I play. So we're going to be doing an unboxing of a full crate. He's after the standard bearer one, which is the rarest one. I had a look on eBay, and they go for £40 each, which is insane. Yeah.
For one beaky.
Yeah, for one model.
40 quid for a beaky, marvellous.
But yeah, so they're on to the 3rd series of these blind bag things now in Japan, which are Plague Marines this time round, which I think are going to be less popular, but deviating away from Space Marines.
Yeah, possibly.
Manchester Nerf has bought a full retail box, and he's going to open every single one and hope he gets that particular model.
Maybe if he gets lucky, he'll have a full set and then can sell a full set. What does a full set go for on eBay? If they're £40 each and there's 8 of them,
it's only that particular one model that goes for 40. Some of the more common ones, like this one,
the rare one.
Yeah. This one with the servo skull next to it, it goes for like 4 or 5 quid, which is amusing because it's my favourite one, and it's one of the ones he gave me. Just because I just love a servo skull, just floating along beside him.
I do like the servo skulls. I have An Inquisitor scale servo skull. I have a from the Sisters of Battle Retributor squad. I cut up one of the cherubim to make like the ammo carriers to make a servo skull.
Did they?
I
see. Yeah.
I also have.
So the one that broke off my emulator. That's focus. That one's just a skull. Can you bring your skull this way? I mean, I know what it looks like because I've seen it, but yeah, Scully boy.
I mean, it is Spooktober.
the holes in the back of the eye socket look really funny on camera. It looks like he's got two little beady eyes.
It's covered in dust, but
yeah.
When I first got this, I was always thinking like I'm gonna make a servo skull from this, and I've never done anything with it. And I've seen people use like foam skulls and attach them to quadcopters to make like floating servo skulls, which is kind of cool. This is too heavy for that kind of thing. I mean, you could suspend this. We have the technology. It would just be loud.
Yeah, we could do a video of it, cut all the audio, and then just play some music over the top. No one would realise.
Yeah, just do a lot of work redoing the entire audio.
Yeah, reloop.
That would make a lot of sense. So, we have an important part of our episode today, and that is a message from the Ordo Redactus, which is the name I'm calling the section where any time a commenter says that something that one of us has said in an episode is wrong. Our first Ordo Redactus message is from Foxy Mitts, who says something. Sorry, just let me read this out. You said you're not in any games right now. You're forgetting Cthulhu, didn't you? I'm not entirely. Excuse me. I'm just going to send that through the translation cogitators to see if we can get that in low Gothic.
Just want to point out that she's a she and doesn't sound like a character from the children's cartoon series Monster Ness.
So the actual message is that I said in episode 1 that I am not currently in any roleplay games. I'm not playing in any. And that's not correct, because Foxy Mitts is games mastering a Cthulhu game that I am part of. And in fact, so is Paul.
Yes, bit of a Call of Cthulhu.
The meaning of what I said was I was talking about models and specifically using models in games. And I'm not in any game, any roleplay game that uses models. However, to be strictly correct, to be technically correct, the best kind of correct, I would have to say that I'm not in any games that use models, because I was talking about models. Therefore, what I actually said was technically wrong. So, judgment from the Ordo Redactus shall be made, and my penance.
A penitent engine. Oh, yeah. Just got to do the gold rim to make them match my army, and that's
that
it.
Gold base rim. That looks really nice for your Battle Sisters. I usually paint my base rims the same colour as the terrain, which is usually grey.
My Space Marines, I don't do a rim. I just paint it the same as, so like this guy that we had earlier, brown and brown. It's just whatever. If it's grey, it's grey.
Yeah.
But the sisters, I felt like, I don't know. It felt more thematic with the majesty of the church in the game. Gold, and I mean, I haven't got one to show.
You would be absolutely sure that if in the world of 40k they actually walked around with discs underneath them, the Sisters of Battle would have them painted gold. They're not painted gold, they would be gold.
Yeah. As always, well, it will be always, I mean, this is only the second episode, all of the models that we've discussed today and shown in the video will have a much better, high quality detail photo on our Instagram. So if you just go over there and search for BackToTheBrush, and we'll put the link in the description below as well, so you can just follow straight over there.
Instagram has a maximum limit of 10 images. So we'll do our best to pick the 10 most relevant and nicest images for that. It depends on, as episodes go on, it depends on what we're talking about, what's the most relevant. I've talked about a lot of orcs. I could easily do 10 images or more just on the orcs, so I'll probably do a group shot of
I think
Ed
Scar needs his own image, because obviously we've done quite a lot talking about him.
The actual Ed Scar model himself, yes.
Thank you very much for watching. What was that?
I have bought a new fire alarm. I promise you, it is in the post. It's not here yet. So, thank you very much for watching. I've been Edgar.
I'm Paul.
And you've been listening to Back to the Brush. For everything else, leave the comments in the comments section below, and we will see you next month.
Bye.